Part 1. WHY. Medieval people drank alcohol like water. Have you ever wondered why? Medieval people drank so much alcohol that almost every daily activity revolved around beer or wine. It sounds like a lifelong party. But behind it lies a vital secret that few people today realize. Alcohol was not just for pleasure, it was a lifeline for survival. In the 21st century we take clean drinking water for granted, but for medieval people, drinking water was like playing Russian roulette with death. It was a gamble where the odds were almost always against humanity. Imagine. Well water, river water, lake water, all were giant bacterial soup bowls filled with all sorts of contamination you wouldn't want to know about. Human waste, dead animals, garbage, all dumped directly into the waterways. Medieval cities even turned rivers into open sewers. In 14th century London, the River Thames was described as a mixture of all kinds of refuse, meaning just one sip could book you an early ticket to meet your maker. As a result, epidemics raged. Dysentery, cholera, and intestinal parasites became the initiation ritual for anyone who dared to drink water. 1 cup of dirty water was enough to put you in bed for weeks or even kill you. Even the nobility fared no better. Medieval castles often placed their water wells right beneath their latrines, meaning the royal drinking water was essentially filtered through their own waste. Amount of wealth? Enough to escape this nightmare. In that context, wine and beer became an invention, accidental yet revolutionary. No one at that time understood about bacteria or sterility, but they realized one simple thing: drink water, drink sickness, drink beer. I survive. Why? Because the boiling and fermentation process in beer production accidentally killed most disease-causing bacteria. A glass of small beer, with an alcohol content of only about 1 to 3%, was enough to kill most pathogens. Well, boiling clean water could also achieve that. Who had enough firewood? Enough time to boil every cup of drinking water daily. But beer, it was water that was already sterilized. Just pour and drink. Quick, convenient, easy. A gallon of beer usually only cost about half a penny, equivalent to the price of a loaf of bread at that time. With an income of about 1 to 2 pennies a day for farmers, beer became the cheapest preventative medicine that anyone could afford. You might be surprised to know that even children in the Middle Ages also drank beer. Of course, this wasn't the intoxicating kind we have today, but small beer, a diluted low-alcohol beer of only about 1%, but safe enough, safer than plain water. For them, it was like a medieval version of Milo. Women held a key role in the beer production industry of that time. They were called alewives, small brewers, who brewed beer at home. They would hang a stick with leaves or dried flowers outside their door to announce a new batch of beer. This can be considered the first version of a modern open sign. A typical day for a medieval person began with breakfast beer. Morning beer with low alcohol content helped them avoid water poisoning and gave them enough strength to work in the fields. They drank more at noon, continued drinking in the afternoon, and finished the day with a slightly stronger drink to help them sleep. Even children over 7 were advised to drink small beer instead of water, and don't think they were drunk all day. Beer back then had a very low alcohol content. Farmers could drink 2-3 liters a day and still work normally with their hoes, sickles, and scythe. It was a nutritious drink, not meant for intoxication. Another interesting point is that alcohol and beer back then did not create clear class distinctions. Like today, everyone drank, only differing in quality and price. The rich drank imported wine, while the poor drank small beer. But whether rich or poor, noble or peasant, everyone understood one thing: water makes you sick, but wine makes you well. Water makes you sick, wine makes you well. Part 2. Drinking alcohol not just for survival, but also for connection. In the Middle Ages, drinking alcohol was not merely a solution to replace water, but also an indispensable part of social life. From peasants to nobles, from churches to market fairs, from villages to cities, people gathered to exchange, share, and connect with each other through glasses of beer and wine. The medieval tavern was the center of all social activities. It was not just for drinking, but also for work, negotiations, dispute resolution, even organizing council meetings, weddings, or contract negotiations. Almost every important village decision was made at the tavern. Medieval people didn't have public libraries or community centers. They didn't have coffee shops or cultural centers. But they had taverns. And that's where news spread, deals were made, and communities were bonded. Taverns usually had a simple, yet extremely practical design. A large room with long tables and benches. Sometimes with an inner courtyard. For large events, there were areas for private seating reserved for merchants or officials, while laborers gathered at tables near the door, regardless of wealth. Taverns were places where everyone could find their spot. In rural areas, community gatherings, called church ales or church beers, were not just for fundraising to repair the church, but also a rare opportunity for the entire village to eat, drink, dance, and socialize. Statistics from England showed that some church ales had up to 90% of villagers participating. Alcohol was the glue that bonded people together in an era where joy was not easily found. Back then, no one could open a tavern as they pleased. Medieval laws were very strict about opening hours, prices, and quality. A law in London from 1825 even stipulated that any tavern must serve all citizens fairly, regardless of their origin. The tavern keeper was called a brewster or alewife, not just sellers of alcohol, but also leaders of the social life of their entire village. They were messengers, mediators, and sometimes even acted as local banks in small villages. Whoever controlled the main beer supply held soft social power. Women, especially ale, once held very important positions in brewing. Before men and professional guilds emerged, even churches and monasteries were not outside the culture of alcohol. On the contrary, they were the largest beer producers. In medieval Europe, monasteries like Benedictine Abbey at Burton-on-Trent produced millions of liters of beer each year, not only for the monks but also for sale to the market. Wine and beer became the main source of income for many churches and contributed to maintaining the social system of that era. Religious pilgrimages, such as to the holy site of Canterbury, also couldn't do without taverns along the way. Pilgrims would stop at taverns, share stories, and exchange news. The pilgrimage badge of that time even featured a wine cup alongside religious symbols. Even during times of political instability, taverns remained the fastest way to spread information. When peasant uprisings broke out, authorities often closed taverns first, knowing, well, that just a few evenings gathered around a beer could spark revolutionary ideas. Medieval people drank not because they loved to party, but because it was the foundation that kept communities functioning. Part 3. Beer and wine, the rhythm of daily life. For medieval people, alcohol didn't just appear on special occasions, but was also an essential part of daily life. From when the sun rose until night fell, every stage of the day was linked to mugs of beer and glasses of wine. This wasn't simply a habit or preference, but the rhythm of life, the way people of that era survived, worked, and enjoyed themselves. The new day began with a glass of breakfast beer. A light, low-alcohol beer, yet sufficient to replace water and ensure health and safety. This drink was so common that even monks were allocated beer rations in the morning before prayer and labor. For them, drinking beer in the morning was no different from our morning coffee today. Lunch and the subsequent working hours also couldn't do without beer. Farmers, artisans, soldiers maintained their energy and alertness thanks to sips of beer throughout the long day. During harvest season, lords even provided extra beer rations to farmers to help them combat the intense heat and maintain their work capacity. An ordinary laborer could consume up to 2-3 liters of beer daily and still remain completely sober and productive. Dinner was often when beer became a bit stronger. Once work was done, people gathered together, enjoying their meal and sipping on richer beers or wine, if they could afford it. Records from noble families of that era even distinguished between daytime beer and nighttime beer. Nighttime beer was stronger and more expensive, suitable for relaxation after a long day. Even children were not excluded from the beer drinking culture. Children over 7 years old were given small beer, a very light type of beer, sometimes with very low alcohol content, but still safer than plain water. At that time, this was completely normal. and encouraged for health. Medieval medical texts even recommended giving diluted wine or small beer to young children instead of water. As night fell, a light drink became a nightcap, a habit of drinking before bed to aid digestion and promote sleep. The belief of medieval people was that a little alcohol before sleep would help prevent toxic vapors from rising to the brain and causing illness. Although modern science may not agree with that, it was an indispensable part of life back then. More importantly, drinking alcohol was also a means for medieval people to enjoy simple pleasures during difficult and uncertain times. Whether it was a wedding, a festival, or small family gatherings, alcohol was always present to make moments more memorable and connect people. Alcohol also played a role in religion and rituals, from Saints' Day celebrations to village festivals, where the sight of cups being raised, toasts being made, and smiles was indispensable. It was a bridge between people, between communities and their faith and traditions. Even when wars, epidemics, or famines occurred, alcohol remained a place of solace, temporary solace, a spiritual uplift, the only thing that could make a dark day lighter. It was not just a drink, but the very soul of medieval life. Therefore, when looking at the tapestry of medieval life, one cannot help but mention alcohol and beer as a fundamental element that not only helped them survive through a perilous era but also helped them preserve communal, traditional, and humanistic values that remain relevant to this day. Han Trian, Thungve Nanven, Mahan Ne Vian Kan Nujanjir. Part 4. Feasts, Festivals, and the Role of Alcohol and Beer on Special Occasions. Besides daily life, alcohol and beer, Jubai, also held a special place in the feasts, festivals, and major events of medieval people. In a society where most of the time was spent in arduous labor and poverty, these festive occasions were rare moments for people to temporarily forget reality, live to the fullest, celebrate, and enjoy themselves. And at the center of it all were always cups full of alcohol and beer. Unmung va ton, hai jung niam vui, vai trung tam cattc luan la nung shik ccc, ag rubai. Medieval weddings are a prime example. Unlike modern weddings that last only an evening or a day, weddings back then could last up to 3 days, or even longer. The amount of beer and wine consumed at these weddings was immense. Cam cci la vian kung lnmt. Wedding feast for a merchant's daughter in the 15th century recorded that they consumed 426 gallons of beer, 63 gallons of wine, and 20 gallons of mead. Hai magi sao gallon, bis sao lit, ba gallon. Drew Vang Vahai Magi P Gallon MIT, all to serve 150 guests over 3 days. This figure is enough to show the significance of GGT MCCG, Quan Trung Ca, alcoholic beverages at large events, not just weddings, royal ceremonies, harvest festivals, or religious festivals. All featured beer and wine. A Christmas celebration held in showed alcohol consumption reaching nearly 4,000 gallons in just 12 days. At royal feasts, servants had the specific duty of pouring wine and ensuring no one's glass was empty for too long. Beer and wine were not just an accompaniment but the center of endless merriment. Even religious festivals were not without beer and wine. St. Martin's Day, marking the end of the grape harvest, and the opening of new wine barrels, was an occasion everyone in the community looked forward to. Monasteries often brewed special beer for major holidays, like Easter. These beverages were not only for entertainment but also held deep spiritual symbolic value. Harvest festivals, marking the end of the harvest season, were also an occasion for villagers to celebrate the fruits of their labor after long, arduous days. During these days, landlords often distributed several gallons of strong beer to each laborer, not just for celebration but also as a well-deserved reward for their efforts. In many places, even court sessions and administrative work were temporarily halted so everyone could participate in the festivities. Birthdays of noble members, especially the birth celebrations of aristocratic children, were also associated with drinking. Rituals, families often sent special drinking cups to friends and relatives with congratulations. The recipient was obligated to drink in celebration and return the cup with as a gift or a good wish, thereby strengthening social and political relationships. These feasts, festivals, and ceremonies were not just occasions for drinking but also a way to build and maintain social connections in a society where everything was based on trust and community. Beer and wine were catalysts that smoothed over conflicts connected people, and made significant moments more memorable. In the overall picture of medieval life, where beer and wine were not just a means of survival but also a symbol of bonding, joy, and hope, it was these full glasses that created memories that people of that era cherished throughout their lives, passed down from generation to generation as an inseparable part of their culture and community spirit. Part 5. Games and entertainment around the drink. Besides drinking in daily life and during festivals, medieval people also knew how to turn drinking into a part of unique games and entertainment activities. These were not just spontaneous fun but also a way to demonstrate courage, skill, and social relationships. One of the most popular games was casting the stone, where players had to lift a heavy stone while keeping a glass of wine steady in their hand. If they spilled the wine or couldn't lift the stone, the player had to drink more as a penalty. This game created a fun, vicious cycle. The more you drank, the harder it was to win, and the more you lost, the more you have to drink. Another game was King of the Table, where the best drinker would be temporarily crowned and had the right to demand others perform silly tasks or drink more. This was an occasion to temporarily reverse social relations, where even ordinary peasants could command those in higher positions in the community. Drink and Dare was an early version of today's Truth or Dare. Players had to choose between performing a bizarre action or drinking their cup dry. There are records of a merchant who was once dared to kiss the snout of a sleeping pig, a task that forced him to drink instead of accepting the challenge. The game Cross the River was also very popular. Players had to walk across a narrow plank while holding a cup of wine. Anyone who slipped and fell into the water or a barrel of water not only got wet but also had to drink more. Records from a monastery describe that even the monks played a milder version of this game during major festivals. Mumble the Peg was a game that challenged skill and sobriety, in which players had to stick a dagger into a table in complex ways. In many places, this game was once banned because it caused many accidents, especially when combined with beer and wine. These drinking games were not merely for fun. They also helped participants train their skills, physical abilities, memory, reflexes, and dexterity, important elements in the working and fighting lives. Ggi Sanlao Yongvachin of the Middle Ages. More importantly, these were occasions where people could laugh, relieve stress, and create beautiful memories in a life that was already their arduous lives, whether in taverns or at village festivals. These games all contributed to creating a lively atmosphere that bonded the community and made each gathering more special. Regardless of wealth or status, anyone could participate, laughing at silly moments and together enjoying the sweet taste of beer and wine. Looking back, it was these drinking games that helped medieval people not only survive, but also live joyfully and united. They reflected a profound philosophy of life. No matter how harsh life could be, people always found joy in simple things and in sharing with one another. Part 6. The Dark Side of Medieval Drinking Culture. Although alcohol played an essential role in medieval life and culture, it also brought with it many unavoidable consequences. Not all stories around a glass of alcohol were joyful. Besides the fun, the bonding, and the lively festivals, medieval people also had to face the dark side of alcohol consumption. One of the most prominent issues was tavern violence, where people gathered, but also a hotspot for brawls. Records from London courts in the 14th century show that nearly 4% of assaults occurred in or near taverns. Some taverns were even notorious for the number of fights that took place. One tavern, named the Broken Sword, was recorded to have had 26 brawls in just 1 year and was later colloquially renamed the Broken Nose as a form of sarcasm. To deal with this situation, many towns adopted curfew regulations requiring taverns to close at a certain hour. In Oxford, the Carfax bell rang at 9 p.m. in winter and 10 p.m. in summer, signaling closing time. Anyone who violated it would be fined or have their business license revoked. Excessive drinking not only caused violence but also led to accidents. In Norwich, some years recorded up to 17 cases of drowning simply because drunk people fell into the river on their way home. Some cities established temporary jails for drunkards to sober up before being brought to court for punishment. Alcohol addiction, though not clearly defined, was recognized by medieval people. Professional guilds often had strict regulations regarding their members' drinking. If someone was deemed to be spending excessively on beer and wine, they could be financially monitored, or even expelled from the guild. Some guilds even had a rule that 3 violations would result in the loss of personal asset management rights, to protect the family from financial ruin. Even the church struggled to control the drinking culture, although the monasteries themselves were leading beer producers. Bishops and priests frequently issued decrees prohibiting monks from frequenting taverns or drinking excessively. However, enforcement was almost hopeless, as many of them were also regular patrons of taverns. Sph Kung Law Ketch Quencie Kuk Tavern. From a medical perspective, medieval people also began to recognize the negative effects Hunan Ra Ta Yung Tu CCC of excessive drinking. Physicians clearly described symptoms such as yellow skin, swollen abdomen, and fatigue, and recommended patients reduce their intake. Although medical knowledge was not sufficient to fully understand the liver or related diseases, signs of health damage from alcohol were already noted. However, what's noteworthy is that medieval society did not attempt to completely ban alcohol consumption. Instead, they chose to control it through social pressure and community rules. Those who drank in moderation were praised. Those who overindulged were often ridiculed or ostracized. Instead of being extreme, they sought to reconcile enjoyment and responsibility. This pragmatic approach helped them maintain a society where alcohol was both a source of joy and a foundation for connection, but at the same time, they didn't let it destroy community life. Medieval drinking culture, therefore, carries within it a profound lesson about balance, knowing how to enjoy but also knowing when to stop. Part 7. How medieval people dealt with the aftermath of drinking. Although medieval people drank almost every day, they couldn't escape a familiar enemy: drunkenness and terrible headaches the morning after, what we now call a hangover. And of course, they also invented countless ways to deal with it. Medieval medicine, though rudimentary, clearly documented the symptoms after drinking too much: heavy head, dry mouth, thirst, body aches, disturbed sleep. A 12th century medical text described a drunk person as someone whose soul wished to ascend to heaven, while their bodies were trapped in a kind of hell. A description both tragicomized and accurate. Without pain relievers, like aspirin or ibuprofen, medieval people had to rely on folk remedies and herbs. One of the most common methods was drinking honey ginger water, which both and reduced nausea. A decoction from willow bark, containing a substance similar to aspirin, is still used today to relieve headaches. There were also some stranger methods. A famous recipe advised eating a boiled egg yolk and rubbing it on the forehead. Some places even crushed swallows' beaks, mixed them with scented oil, and applied them behind the ears. To dispel the heavy-headed feeling, many chose to drink a little more alcohol the next morning, known as hair of the dog, to soothe the symptoms, though this method only provided temporary relief and prolonged the suffering. Physicians recorded many prescriptions for monks who had overindulged during large festivities. 1. Prescription recommended a decoction of mint leaves and chamomile to soothe the stomach and relax the nerves. However, many medieval people accepted that a hangover was inevitable. The price to pay for a night of excessive revelry, they considered it an essential part of life and chose to endure it rather than trying to avoid it completely. To limit the consequences, medieval people also had golden rules. For drinking, don't drink on an empty stomach, eat fatty foods to slow alcohol absorption, drink slowly, and no stopping point. These simple pieces of advice are still valid and applied to this day. Today, some communities even have collective regulations to protect the workday. After major holidays, for example, after the harvest festival, many villages would dedicate an entire light day for recovery, instead of forcing everyone to work hard immediately. This reflects a society with deep empathy and understanding of human limitations. Medieval literature and folklore also abound, with humorous stories revolving around the consequences of excessive drinking. Images of monks preaching in the morning after getting completely drunk the night before are rampant in tales and poetry, contributing to the unique charm of the culture of that era. What's interesting is that even though science today has advanced, what the medieval people experienced when drunk, and how they dealt with it is not much different from us. From headaches to folk remedies, from laughter to unforgettable lessons, all show the closeness between the past and the present in how people seek joy, and take responsibility for its consequences. Part 8. The Legacy of Medieval Drinking Culture and Conclusion. Medieval drinking culture was not merely a survival practice or a simple pleasure, but an inseparable part of the social, spiritual, and cultural life of Europe during this period. Over centuries, the habits, rituals, and values associated with alcohol have left a profound mark and continue to influence how we live and interact today. Throughout the Middle, Tala Mechi Ti Nung Sien, Kalhu Nung Muak, Chua Muak, Dan Gyon Ti Tinku Ji, Chohan Nung by HCC, Enchin, GGITTC, Hucho, The SSG Gu, Ga Kwa, KVA Huan Ti Trong Cash, Kandri Tien Tiem Kim Niam Vui, Vachu Trak Niam Vivi Hu Kwa Ca Na, Fontam DSNN Ca Van Hoa, Angru Trung Si Va Li Ye, KNT Van Hoa, Angru, The Trung Si Kang Chia La, MT Tine Pi Quan Sinch Tien, Haitech Vui, Hun Thun Makan La, MT Fun Kang, The Tatri Ca, GGI San Xi Hai Tin Thine Ve Van Hoa Show. Yu Thi K Ne Kwe, Hang the K Nung Thoi Quen Ni. Thick Vijia Trop, Jian Lian Vive Rubaya, GG Le DSUN, Sao Kiem Vivi, Tip TIC, FN Haijung Hankash, Chung, Ta Sun Ve Jiao Tipping, Ne Trong Suit Thi Trung. From small villages to large cities, from peasants to nobles, from churches to royal palaces, alcohol was present everywhere, and not only helped people survive in a world full of disease and poverty, but also served as a catalyst for human connection, a tool to maintain social order and create beautiful memories. Taverns, wedding feasts lasting for days, harvest festivals brimming with joy, all revolved around raised glasses. They were places where stories were told, deals were struck, ideas were conceived, and friendships were forged. Alcohol became the foundation not just of joy, but also of fundamental social values, sharing, solidarity, and community spirit. Even the darker aspects such as violence, addiction, or health consequences were realistically acknowledged and addressed, rather than absolutely forbidden. Medieval people understood that alcohol, like anything else in life, required moderation and responsibility. They accepted mistakes, hangovers, and morning headaches as part of the human journey. The legacy they left behind is not only found in material remnants but also exists in modern habits and culture. Pubs in England, beer festivals in Germany, weekend gatherings with friends are descendants of the culture of medieval drinking culture. Drinking gatherings, or even jokes about drunkenness, all originated centuries ago. The biggest lesson we can draw from medieval drinking culture is balance. They understood that people need moments of quiet, small joys, and opportunities to unwind, to forget their hardships, but they also realized that everything in excess leads to consequences. Therefore, despite drinking a lot, the medieval people still maintained a society where community was always prioritized. Today, when we raise a glass at a party, enjoy a glass of beer with friends, or simply sit back and relax with a glass of wine after work, the spirit of the medieval people still echoes. Somewhere, drinking was not just for enjoyment, but also for connection, for sharing, and to enrich one's spiritual life. And if there's one last thing to remind ourselves, it is this: drink like the medieval people, know how to enjoy, but also know when to stop. That is the secret to lasting joy and cherished memories. Please subscribe to the channel to discover more fascinating secrets about the medieval world.